that is the one where the impact.
The cause of India's freedom for many years.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr.
America is a constant work in progress.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Laura Macon-Isherwood, and in this bulletin we'll get you updates on stories developing around the world. First, let's take a look at the top headlines. All American and NATO troops leave Bagram, the biggest airbase in Afghanistan. This comes as a big signal that the complete withdrawal of foreign forces is imminent after 2 decades of war. In Istanbul, protesters clash with the police during a demonstration against Turkey's controversial exit from a treaty against femicide and domestic abuse. Police fire tear gas to deter protesters. Despite being one of the world's leaders in vaccinations, Israel reports its highest daily infection rate in 3 months. 307 new cases, mostly linked to the Delta variant. Despite assurances by the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, Finance Minister Simon Birmingham says that the country is at the back of the queue for Pfizer vaccines. Evacuations take place as firefighters battle intense flames across parts of Northern California in the US and British Columbia in Canada. Several homes have been destroyed. And the space race for billionaires is heating up. Richard Branson one-ups rival Jeff Bezos, announcing that he too will blast beyond the Earth's atmosphere 9 days ahead of the Amazon founder. Massive protests erupted across Turkey after the country formally withdrew from an international treaty, the Istanbul Convention preventing violence against women. President Erdogan's move has sparked outrage among women in Turkey. Erdogan, however, has defended the decision.
Thousands hit the streets in Istanbul. Protesters with banners who were raising slogans were met with barriers and tear gas. This came just hours after Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan formally withdrew from the Istanbul Convention, a treaty combating femicide and domestic violence.
Every day, without exception, a woman that we know or not is killed. There's no guarantee that we won't come next. Therefore, we will resist until the very end. If needed, we will take to the streets again tomorrow or a month after. We will defend this convention until it comes back into force. We will never give up on our rights or our lives.
I am sure women are exposed to violence, rape and abuse elsewhere in the world. But in the end, they know that those people will be punished. There will be a deterrent punishment and the state will protect them. But I cannot say this. There is nobody to protect me and this is really awful.
Demonstrators across Turkey rallied in support of the convention. While protests in Ankara remained peaceful, they took a violent turn in Istanbul after police did not allow protesters to walk to the Taksim Square.
Even before this, our rights weren't guaranteed. Even when there was Istanbul Convention, it was only by name. We used to fight to get it implemented. Now they believe they can exit the convention by the decision of one man. But women will not give up. They will see how stubborn we are.
I feel like it would be even better if women felt safe in this country. And I feel like right now, withdrawing from this convention, it's just a way of saying we don't care what happens to you. We don't care if you experience violence. There's nothing to protect you from now on. So this personally affects me as well.
The 2011 pact signed by 45 countries and the European Union requires government to adopt legislation linked to prosecution of crimes including marital rape and female genital mutilation. Defending his decision, on Thursday, President Erdogan said that Turkey's commitment to end violence against women would not suffer.
Some groups are trying to present our official withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention on July 1st as going backwards. Just like our fight against violence towards women did not start with the Istanbul Convention, it won't end with our withdrawal.
Erdogan's move has angered women in Turkey. Rights groups say that the decision will put women at greater risk of violence when femicide is already prevalent in Turkey. They also called the withdrawal an attempt to appease the conservatives. Turkey's move has drawn strong criticism from the Western allies, United States and the European Union. Erdogan had announced the withdrawal in March this year, saying that Turkey would use local laws to protect women's rights. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Amid simmering tensions between Iran and the West, top diplomats say Tehran has been restricting United Nations nuclear inspectors' access to its main uranium enrichment plant at Natanz. Sources say Iran has cited security concerns after what it says was an attack on the site in April. There was an explosion and power cut in the city, which is the heart of Iran's uranium enrichment program. The incident appears to have damaged centrifuges at the fuel enrichment plant there. The last quarterly report by the International Atomic Energy Agency showed that Iran's enrichment output had slowed. Diplomats say the standoff, which has been going on for weeks, is in the course of being resolved. They also said that tensions spiked as indirect talks between Iran and the United States on reviving the 2015 nuclear deal were adjourned without a date set for resumption. The standoff was triggered by various moves by Iran that breached the 2015 nuclear deal, including enriching uranium. Iran's failure to explain the origin of uranium particles that the UN nuclear watchdog found at several undeclared sites angered Washington and its allies. The International Atomic Energy Agency declined to make a statement, citing its general policy of not commenting on inspection matters. Iran and the IAEA have quarrelled in the past too over access. In 2020, Iran denied the IAEA access to 2 locations for snap inspections. In 2019, Iran even held an IAEA inspector and seized her travel documents, after which the international body called an emergency meeting of its 35-nation Board of Governors. Washington and the European Union allies have been pressuring Iran over its breach of the 2015 deal. Earlier this week, United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres appealed to the Biden administration to lift or waive all sanctions on Iran as agreed under the 2015 deal, which is aimed at stopping Tehran from developing a nuclear weapon. Israel, the country that had set a milestone by vaccinating most of its adult population, is now struggling to contain the spread of COVID-19. Israel has reported its highest daily infection rate in 3 months. The Health Ministry recorded 307 new cases on Wednesday. It comes as the Delta variant continues to spread across the country. It also marks a jump from 293 cases, which were reported on the previous day. The Health Ministry expects the cases to rise further in the coming days. This has raised concerns that Israel could be plunging back into a COVID crisis. Even though the cases continue to rise, there has been little uptick, though, in the number of deaths. In the last 2 weeks, only 1 person has succumbed to the virus. Israel has a population of 9.3 million people. 5.1 million of them are fully vaccinated. Authorities had lifted nearly all COVID restrictions and people were reopening businesses, children were back in school and public gatherings had begun like the pre-pandemic era. Authorities say they are currently focusing on vaccinating children. Israel has inoculated the highest number of children this week. Authorities have also reimposed a rule that requires people to wear masks indoors. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has also appointed a coronavirus commissioner to manage arrivals at the Ben Gurion International Airport, which he calls a huge national vulnerability. The government has also said that officials are prepared to close the airport if the COVID trend worsens. Israeli media has reported that officials were considering bringing back the Green Pass system, which differentiated between vaccinated and non-vaccinated citizens in accessing certain venues and activities. The government was also mulling over the reopening of the country to vaccinated tourists. However, the plan has been postponed due to the spread of the Delta variant. Europe is witnessing a surge in coronavirus infections as fans continue to gather for the Euro 2020 soccer tournament. In the last week, there has been a 10% increase in coronavirus cases. The World Health Organization is now calling for Euro 2020 monitoring. Our next report gets you the details.
Crowds gathering for the Euro 2020 soccer tournament are driving the current rise in coronavirus infections in Europe, the World Health Organization said on Thursday. The number of new cases rose by 10% last week. The WHO says that was driven by the mixing of crowds in Euro 2020 host cities, travel and the easing of social restrictions. Catherine Smallwood is the WHO's senior emergency officer.
What we need to look at is around the stadia, how are people getting there? Are they travelling in large, crowded convoys of buses? Are they taking individual measures when they're doing that? What's happening after the games when people leave the stadiums? Are they going into crowded bars and pubs to watch the matches? And we've said that should these things, this mixing happen, there will be cases. Because if this mixing is happening among people who are not fully vaccinated and there is the presence of the virus, there will be cases.
The WHO said that Europe had seen a 10-week decline in new coronavirus infections before the Games. Now, the rise in new COVID cases is happening as the more contagious Delta variant spreads rapidly across the continent. European soccer's governing body UEFA said in a statement to Reuters that mitigation measures at host venues are, quote, fully aligned with the regulations set out by the competent local public health authorities. Germany's interior minister called UEFA's decision to allow big crowds utterly irresponsible, and Italy has warned fans from England not to try to use loopholes in COVID travel restrictions to sneak into the quarterfinals in Rome on Saturday, even if they have a ticket. The rise in infections has raised concern that a third wave could spread across Europe in the autumn if people don't get vaccinated.
Britons might not be able to enjoy a getaway to Europe anytime soon. The European Union's digital travel certificate aims to keep Britons out of the EU who have received AstraZeneca jabs manufactured in India. This is because the European Union's passport scheme does not recognise the Indian version of the AstraZeneca vaccine, according to a report in The Telegraph. The move could affect travel plans for up to 5 million Britons. The UK is currently witnessing a rise in the number of Delta variant cases, something that has generated concern in the EU bloc. India's version of AstraZeneca's COVID vaccine has not been authorised by the EU due to possibilities of what it calls differences with the original. The EU has approved 4 vaccines, which includes Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson. Russia's Sputnik, China's Sinovac, Germany's CureVac and the US Novavax are under review. The World Health Organization has already approved Covishield. It expressed disappointment over the fact that some countries are rejecting its use on vaccination passes. The EU's decision caused outrage in Asia and Africa as the 2 continents are the major beneficiaries of the Covishield through the COVAX scheme. According to a new Dutch study, pets and dogs and cats in particular can catch the COVID-19 infection from their owners. Researchers at the Utrecht University tested 310 pets from 196 households where a human being had been infected. Here's what the study concluded.
If you think you might have COVID-19, it's probably a good idea to stay well away from your pets. That's according to the author of a Dutch study. Utrecht University doctor Els Brouwens discovered a significant number of cats and dogs might be catching the disease from their owners.
So about 1 out of 5 pets will catch the disease from their owners because the most likely transmission is from human to pet. So this is a rather high prevalence, but on the other hand, luckily the animals do not get very ill from it.
Brouwens' study tested 156 dogs and 154 cats from 196 households, where humans were known to have contracted coronavirus. About 17% of the animals, 31 cats and 23 dogs, had antibodies for COVID-19. That suggests they had previously experienced the infection. 6 cats and 7 dogs actually had an active infection, as determined by a PCR test. Brouwens says the virus is well adapted to humans, but less adapted to animals.
Like the PCR positive animals, we went back to the positive to test them again, and we saw that they didn't pass it to the other pets in the household, and also that they all cleared the disease pretty fast. So it seems that they are just not very long that they are spreading the virus, and there are no cases described yet where we see there's pet to human transmission.
Although we've known for a while that other mammals can catch the virus, other species do not get seriously ill. Only minks are believed to have been infected by the disease by humans and then subsequently passed it on to other humans. But if you're feeling unwell, it's probably best to steer clear of your furry friends regardless.
More than 18 months into the pandemic, Australia has only managed to fully vaccinate less than 8% of its population. The country's finance minister, Simon Birmingham, has said that Australia is at the back of the queue for Pfizer vaccines. According to a Reuters report, Birmingham said that the worst affected countries have taken priority. The statement comes in stark contrast to assurances given by the Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. He said the current strategy puts Australia at the front of the queue. So let's take a look at exactly how many vaccines are available to Australians and how many of them have been inoculated. In April this year, the government announced a purchase of 20 million doses of Pfizer vaccine. In May, it announced another agreement to secure 25 million doses of Moderna vaccine. At this point, only 7% of people above 16 years of age, 9% of people above 50 years of age, and 15% of people above 70 years of age are fully vaccinated. And at a time when Australia needs an aggressive vaccine rollout, there is a parallel controversy brewing at the top level. Simon Birmingham has accused the Queensland Premier, Anastasia Palaszczuk, of spreading extremist views. This comes after she and the Chief Health Officer urged Australians under 40 years of age against receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine. Ms. Palaszczuk allegedly said that getting the vaccine could potentially cause harm. Birmingham came down heavily on the pair and called their intervention deeply unhelpful and shameful. Australia has announced a 4-stage pathway to pull the country out of the COVID crisis. This involves implementation of the National Vaccination Plan, easing of restrictions inside the country, lifting rules for vaccinated travellers, and attempting to return the country to a pre-COVID normal. Western Canada has been facing unprecedented heat for days. Hundreds of people were evacuated as forest fires added to the record-breaking temperatures in the region. The wildfires tore through a small Canadian town of Lytton.
A forest fire that ignited after days of record-breaking temperatures has destroyed most of the small Western Canadian town of Lytton. That's according to local politician Brad Viss on Thursday, which also marks the Canada Day holiday. Viss said in a Facebook post, quote, "The town has sustained structural damage and 90% of the village is burned, including the center of town." Lytton in central British Columbia this week broke Canada's all-time hottest temperature record 3 times, hitting 121 degrees Fahrenheit or 49 degrees Celsius on Tuesday. Late on Wednesday, the mayor said the whole town was on fire. More than 1,000 people in and around the town were then forced to evacuate. The extreme heat has punished residents far and wide. At least 486 sudden deaths were reported in the province of BC over 5 hot days. That's nearly 3 times the usual number, according to officials. An unprecedented heat wave has also left a rising death toll in its wake in the Northwest United States. Christy Eby, a professor at the University of Washington, says people often underestimate the danger of high temperatures.
Most people don't think about heat as a killer, and it is. And we know that the numbers are fairly high. Estimates of the number of excess heat-related deaths in counties that cover just 62% of our population suggest that 5,500 Americans die every year from the heat. Certainly, the event we've seen, we're going to see excess deaths a lot more than we should have, because all of those deaths could have been prevented. So we have to raise that awareness.
In Oregon, where 63 deaths have so far been linked to the heat wave, Governor Kate Brown this week declared a state of emergency, while the Portland Fire Department banned the use of fireworks for the 4th of July weekend.
In the face of potential tax avoidance by major tech companies, 130 countries have agreed on a global tax reform, ensuring that multinationals pay their fair share wherever they operate. Global companies, including US giants Google, Amazon, Facebook and Apple, would be taxed at 15% once the deal is implemented, and would impact global companies with profit margins of at least 10%. The goal is to prevent companies from moving their headquarters to low-tax countries to shield their earnings. The talks were hosted by the Paris-based Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, which concluded that the global minimum corporate income tax tax of at least 15% could yield around $150 billion in additional global tax revenues every year. The OECD said that the new tax regime will hopefully come into force in 2023. Welcoming the agreement, US President Joe Biden said the accord would make the global economy more equitable for workers. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen called the deal historic and said it is a clear sign the race to the bottom is one step closer to coming to an end. The UK's Finance Minister also added that the formal agreement marks a further step in the mission to reform global tax, calling it the most important international tax deal reached in a century, while France's Finance Minister has said the deal should allow France to yield additional fiscal revenues between 5 and 10 billion euros.
Cet accord doit permettre de dégager des recettes fiscales supplémentaires pour la France, comprises entre 5 et 10 milliards d'euros. Cet accord conclut donc 4 années de combat que nous avons menées avec le président de la République pour une fiscalité internationale plus juste et plus efficace.
The 130 countries who have backed the agreement represent more than 90% of the global GDP. The minimum corporate tax does not require countries to set their rates at the agreed floor, but it gives other countries the right to apply a top-up levy to the minimum on companies' income coming from a country that has a lower rate. 9 of the 139 participants in the talks have so far not signed on to the agreement. Low-tax countries in the European Union, like Ireland and Hungary, declined to sign up, highlighting lingering divisions on global taxation. Both countries are part of a group of EU nations that includes Luxembourg and Poland. These nations have relied on low tax rates to attract multinationals and build their economies. Ireland is the EU home to tech giants Facebook, Google and Apple, and has a corporate tax rate of just 12.5%. Irish Finance Minister Paschal Donohoe said Ireland still broadly supports the deal, but not the 15% tax floor. He had warned earlier that the new rules could see Ireland lose 20% of its corporate revenue. Also expressing concerns is Switzerland, known for its banking secrecy laws. The nation said it would support the measures despite major reservations, and that it hoped interests of small, innovative countries would be taken into account. The formal agreement follows an endorsement by the G7 group of wealthy nations last month. Negotiations now move to a meeting of the G20 group of developed and emerging economies on July the 9th to 10th in Venice in Italy. An agreement for the implementation of the plan is planned for October. Well, that's all we have time for today on WION Live Broadcast from London. For more global news and updates, stay tuned to WION World is One.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.